The Staircase Whispers of Unseen Crimes. Welcome to Wolfe's Casebook. I am your host, Enigma. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I can't wait to see. Now let's climb into the mystery. If you've ever watched a man refuse a perfectly good reason to leave his house, while simultaneously making it impossible for anyone else to sit still, you'll have a fair idea of what it's like to work for Nero Wolfe. The trick of it is that he never gives you the reason up front. He hands you a fact, lets you squint at it, and when you're about to ask why it matters, he looks over his glasses like a bored bishop and says something that makes you wish you had never learned to speak English. The Tuesday started the way most decent Tuesdays in the brownstone start, with me in the office at 10:30, Wolfe upstairs among his orchids at 11, Fritz in the kitchen ruling his domain with a light hand and a heavy palate, and Theodore Horstman doing whatever Theodore does at the exact moment you don't need him. Nothing was on fire. Nobody was screaming. The telephone wasn't trying to crawl off the desk and bite me. On our scale, that rates as serene. I was finishing a letter to a man in Milwaukee who wanted Wolfe to find out which of his cousins was bleeding him through a lumber trust. It was the third cousin by my count. But Wolfe says, you never assume a man is rational just because he grows trees for a living. He was right about that cousin thing anyway. The doorbell rang. It was not a timid ring. It had "let's get to it" in the wrist. I looked at the clock, 10:47, and swiveled my chair so I could see the front hall through the office doorway. Whoever it was, he wasn't making a practice of waiting for servants. The bell rang again before I got halfway to the hall. I opened the door myself. He was about my height, which is not true of many men unless they've had to duck for a living, and he wore a dark coat that looked like it had been bought to last rather than to impress. His hat was in his hand already, which was polite, but his face didn't match the gesture. He had the kind of eyes that tell you they've been looking over their shoulder even when they're looking straight at you. "Mr. Goodwin," he asked. "You've got him. If you were expecting Mr. Wolfe, you'll need to raise your eyes about 8 inches and add a good deal of weight. Come in." He stepped inside, glanced right and left, up and down, like a man who couldn't help checking the exits, even in church. He didn't look like a lunatic. He looked like someone who had acquired a habit for reasons he didn't intend to discuss. "My name is Caleb Hunt," he said. His voice was steady enough, but there was a little sand in it, like he wasn't sleeping great. "Caleb Hunt." I filed it away. "You come by appointment?" "No. I tried phoning yesterday, but I was told Mr. Wolfe doesn't take new clients without hearing the situation from you first. I need to speak to him." There's a correct way to approach a brownstone that is to Nero Wolfe what a correct entree is to Fritz. You don't barge in. You don't demand. You don't presume the orchids are optional. Wolfe hates being pressed about leaving the house, but he hates more being pressed about anything. "Let's do this in the office," I said. "Mr. Wolfe comes down at 12:15. If your business is good, I can get him early. If your business is bad, I can save you some money and a hard stare." His mouth twitched. It wasn't a smile. It was recognition. He'd been braced to be shoved around, and he was getting something different. He followed me to the office and sat in the red leather chair facing my desk. He didn't sit on the edge like a man in a hurry, and he didn't sink into it like a man looking for comfort. He placed his hat on his knee and held it there as if it might be a shield. I went behind the desk, sat, and waited. Silence works better than interrogation if you can stand it. He stood it longer than most. That's how I knew Wolfe would want him. "I didn't come because of a murder," he said finally. "That line doesn't scare me. We're equal opportunity. Theft, blackmail, missing persons, adulterous lumber cousins. Not that either. Then you're down to sabotage, betrayal, or a pigeon that won't come home. If it's a pigeon, I'll send you to a nicer man." He ignored the crack. "I came because something happened in this house." That was new. It made me stare at him for a second. Quick, clean, non-committal. Then I relaxed my shoulders like it didn't matter. Nothing happened in this house without my knowing about it, I said. That's what I thought. Start from the top. How was your morning? I was here Sunday night. At a party? We don't do parties. I was here on business. I met with Mr. Wolfe. That got a small internal bell going. Sunday night. Wolfe doesn't meet clients Sunday night unless A, a substantial fee is promised, or B, he has already decided he wants whatever puzzle is on offer. Since I'd had no idea we had a Sunday client, I was already suspicious of the reason. Wolfe doesn't like surprises, but he likes me being surprised less. I don't remember that, I said. You weren't here. Try again. He took a breath. I was here about 7. I didn't come to the office. I came to the front door and spoke to the cook, Mr. Fritz Brenner. Now I remembered. I'd been out to dinner that night with Lily Rowan. Yes, that Lily Rowan. And no details for you, and I'd gotten back around 10. Fritz had told me a man came by with a note for Wolfe. He said Wolfe read it, said phooey, and went back to his book. That was Fritz's entire report. I didn't press because I had a respectable plan involving a late sandwich and sleep. So Sunday had a tail, and the tail was sitting in my chair looking like he'd been carrying a sack of wet cement. Okay, I said. You came with a note. Mr. Wolfe decided not to see you. Yet here you are. What changed, besides your posture? He looked at me straight. He did see me. My eyebrows did the polite arch. I didn't help him by rushing. I just didn't move. He sent Fritz to get me. I was brought in. We spoke in the office. His eyes flicked just a hair to the chair on my right where Wolfe sits like a lord at court. He listened. He asked questions. He agreed to take the matter. He said he'd contact me Monday. He didn't, I said. No, he didn't contact me. And when I called yesterday, your cook said Mr. Wolfe was unavailable and that no case was pending under my name. A thin draft slid under the door in my brain. I didn't like it. It had the smell of a window left open in winter. The only people who cancel Wolfe's cases are Wolfe himself and death. The only people who forget a case are clients trying to skip a bill. Wolfe doesn't forget. That's peculiar, I said mildly. What did you say your business was? He hesitated, and I could see the inside of his head doing the math on how much to tell an assistant he'd just met. He chose a slice, not the loaf. I'm an auditor, he said. Independent. I do financial investigations for private clients, not the police, not the government, companies, estates, boards. Which means you're either a hero or a rat, depending who hires you. He gave me a look that asked if that was intended to be funny. I let it be. If you talk too much while a man is deciding how deep the water is, he'll decide it's shallow and step elsewhere. I was employed by the Lafferty Foundation, he said. That was a bell and not a small one. The Lafferty Foundation is New York money old enough to have a cane. They repair libraries, endow scholarships, and throw a very handsome tax shadow. I'd seen their name on plaques. You don't get hired by them unless you're good or dangerous. To look over their books, I asked. To verify an internal report about misallocation. There was a whistleblower. Anonymous. The board wanted discreet confirmation before they took action. Discreet auditors are like discreet elephants, I said. So what happened? I found evidence of a concealed account, he said. Not a big one, but carefully hidden. It wasn't embezzlement exactly. It went to a shell charity. The shell charity used sub-grants to fund a research group outside of the foundation's approved scope. What kind of research? I asked. Behavioral persuasion, political modeling, influence mapping. Things the foundation doesn't touch. The board informed me, informally, that if my findings were accurate, they would confront the director. I had a meeting scheduled Monday morning. Let me guess, I said. You didn't make it to that meeting. I made it. Nothing came of it. The documents I'd prepared were different. Files missing. Names altered. The concealed account I'd traced no longer existed in the ledger. My own notes were intact, but the source material had been replaced. Replaced, I repeated. Not destroyed. Yes, someone didn't want me to show the board proof. And your whistleblower? I asked. He made a face like the word tasted off. I don't know who it is. I was contacted through a dead-drop email. The person is intelligent and careful. They sent me just enough to direct my search. And once you had directed it, somebody got ahead of you. Yes. So that's why you came to us. You wanted Wolfe to identify who inside a foundation is playing three-card Monty with their own books. No. Why then? He looked down at his hat as though it might give him a better option. It didn't. Because Sunday morning I received a message, he said. A new one. It instructed me to bring the evidence to Mr. Wolfe. I waited. It didn't say why, he went on. I considered going to the police. Then I considered that the police would be forced to notify the foundation, and if someone inside it is already altering records, alerting them would make evidence sprout legs, I said. You're not wrong. So you saw Wolfe. You gave him whatever evidence you had. He agreed to take it. And now he denies it happened. Or he never told me, I said. I was already running through possible reasons, and none of them were comforting. What exactly did you hand Mr. Wolfe? A folder, photocopies, a summary, a list of persons with access to the accounts, the whistleblower's communications. He touched the inside pocket of his coat as if feeling for a ghost. I gave him the only full copy. Did you keep anything? I kept my own working notes and a second-tier photocopy set in a safe deposit box. The core documentation was to stay with him. He insisted. He said my safety required it. That was Wolfe, all right. It had his stamp, paternal, autocratic, and annoyingly correct most of the time. You said safety. Was somebody threatening you? I don't know. His eyes lifted to mine. But yesterday at 8:30 I was followed from my office to my apartment. When I called a cab and doubled back, the same car came around the block. And 2 hours ago, on my way here, a man in a tan scarf bumped my shoulder in front of the building and said, "You wouldn't want to make the staircase whisper again." He said that last part quietly, but it raised the hair on my forearms. He didn't speak like a man trying to buy drama. He spoke like somebody repeating a line he couldn't get rid of. Staircase, I said. What staircase? He swallowed. Sunday night, after Mr. Wolfe and I spoke. I left around 9. Your brownstone is old. The stairs creak. Mine did. Turned back halfway down because I thought I heard a voice. From where? From above. From the upper landing. Someone said my name, softly, like a whisper. Caleb. I couldn't see anyone. I thought perhaps you'd followed me out to say something, or your cook had called me back. So I went up 2 steps and looked. There was no one. He let the silence hang like a coat on a hook. I left, he said. But the next morning I found my briefcase open at home. The folder with the carbon copies I'd meant to put in the safe deposit box was gone. That's why I made the backup photocopies later. Whoever did it knew I'd been here that evening. They knew what I had. Uh-huh. I leaned back. And the tan-scarf philosopher thinks the staircase has a mouth. He wanted to remind me that Sunday was not a misunderstanding. Fritz's footsteps passed the office door, soft and efficient. Smell of coffee drifted after him. The normal domesticity of it was almost insulting. In the middle of a safe, ordered house, a man had heard a whisper on the stairs. If that whisper belonged to someone with business in our line, it was one of 2 things, a plea or a threat. So now you're here, I said, because you think Mr. Wolfe is pretending he never met you. Or he's been forced to. That landed harder. Wolfe being coerced is a scenario I keep on a high shelf labeled, "Don't be stupid." But sometimes a high shelf falls. Why didn't you come Monday when he didn't call? I asked. I was supposed to meet the board first. I hoped the issue resolved itself. It didn't. Yesterday my office was entered. Nothing taken, just moved. A framed certificate turned slightly. A drawer half closed, a pen set on its side. A calling card. He nodded. And the dead drop email is gone. No messages. No login. Like it never existed. I stared at him, weighing. The trouble with weighing is that in our business, the scales are usually crooked. You came to the right place, I said. I still need to check one thing. Wait here. I went into the hall and up the stairs to the second floor. Wolfe's plant room door was ajar, and the air smelled like wet green life. Inside, Wolfe was on his high stool, tending a cataleya with a thin stick, his big hands moving with the delicacy of a pianist who's also a bear. Wolfe, I said. He didn't look around. Yes, Archie. We have a man downstairs named Caleb Hunt. He says he was here Sunday night. He says you saw him and took a case from him, and now when he calls you, deny it. He also says somebody whispered his name on the stairs while he was leaving, and he's being followed. Wolfe fixed the cane in the pot. Only then did he turn his head, slow, like a planet obeying gravity. You are certain he is downstairs? Yes. Wolfe blinked once. He didn't blink often. Bring him to the office at once. That's not a no, then. It is not. Wolfe's voice turned cool. It is also not a yes. Archie, on Sunday evening I did not see a man named Caleb Hunt. I did not accept a folder from him. I did not speak to him in the office, yet I have no doubt that he believes I did. I felt my face go still. You're telling me he's lying. I'm telling you, Wolfe said, that I am not. There is a distinction. That's cute, I said. Also unsettling. It should be unsettling. Wolfe's eyes hardened, and that was not about orchids. There has been a trespass in this house. I do not yet know its form, but if a man is induced to believe he came here, if he is made to remember an interview that never occurred, then my brownstone has been used as a device in another man's strategy. You mean he was here, just not to see you? Possibly. Or he was elsewhere and the memory is a plant. The details you reported suggest a deliberate construction. Why would anyone bother planting a memory about your office? Wolfe's mouth compressed. Because the office is a crucible. If a miscreant can place his victim here, in his mind or in fact, he can also place responsibility here, or conceal his own. He pushed himself off the stool and lumbered toward the door with more speed than you'd expect from a man who prefers stillness as a moral position. Archie, he said as we started down, the phrase he reported, about the whispering staircase, does it strike you as arbitrary? Not unless somebody was looking for a poetic touch. Exactly. It is a signpost. It was spoken to be repeated. To us. To you. To this house. Wolfe went down the stairs without hurry, but with weight, and I knew that if I had to carry what was on his mind, I'd need a dolly. If I did not see Caleb Hunt on Sunday evening, then someone wanted him to believe I did. That someone had access to my front door, my stairwell, perhaps to Fritz, perhaps to you, perhaps to me. His eyes slid to mine. This will not stand. That last line was pure Wolfe. Not because he'd borrowed it, but because when he says a thing won't stand, it generally ends up lying down. We reached the office. I opened the door. Hunt rose halfway from his chair when Wolfe came in, then stopped and watched him with a mixture of expectation and apprehension. Wolfe sat heavily in his red leather chair, folded his hands on the armrests, and looked at Hunt the way a judge looks at a witness who may or may not be real. Mr. Hunt, Wolfe said, good morning. I have been told you and I spoke here on Sunday evening. That is false. Yet I perceive no benefit to you in asserting it. Therefore, I invite you to tell me, from the beginning and with precision, what you seek. Archie will take notes. Hunt stared. His mouth opened, then closed. I could see the color drain a shade from his face. He was either an actor or in trouble. If he was acting, he deserved a matinee. But, he started. From the beginning, Wolfe repeated, without raising his voice. Hunt looked at me, and I gave him the smallest shake of my head. If Wolfe says begin, you begin. You don't argue about the letter when the word might be about to kill you. So Hunt began again, with the Lafferty Foundation, the dead drop whistleblower, the shell account, the altered records, the stolen carbon copies, the whisper on the stairs, and the tan scarf. He did it cleaner this time, because he was scared. He also did it more convincingly, because nobody tells a lie the same way twice unless they've rehearsed it, and this guy looked like he'd been rehearsing sleep deprivation. Wolfe listened without interruption until Hunt had used up his last sentence. Then he was quiet, long enough that I heard the clock, and somewhere upstairs, a floorboard settle. "Thank you," Wolfe said. "You will remain available." "Of course," Hunt said hoarsely. "But I don't understand. Sunday." "You do not need to understand immediately." Wolfe's gaze held him. "It suffices that I do." He turned to me. "Archie," he said, "there is a matter here that touches both the integrity of a foundation and the integrity of this house. I will accept it." "Fee?" I asked, because if you don't ask Wolfe about money early, he invents extra syllables for it later. Wolfe's eyes stayed on Hunt. $10,000 retainer, to be replenished as necessary. Mr. Hunt will notify the Lafferty board that he has engaged me. He will not describe my involvement beyond that. Hunt blinked, but he didn't argue. That told me too. The Foundation's pockets were deep and he wasn't here to haggle. "Now," Wolfe said, "there is a preliminary problem. Mr. Hunt believes he was here Sunday evening and gave me documents. That belief is untrue. If he is not lying, it was induced in him. We must determine how." He shifted, which for Wolfe counts as pacing. "Mr. Hunt," he said, "when you came to this house Sunday, did Fritz Brenner open the door?" "Yes." "Did he say anything unusual?" "No, he was polite. He took my note. He asked me to wait while he went upstairs. Then he returned and said Mr. Wolfe would see me." "You did not find this inconsistent with your previous telephone attempt?" "I was grateful," Hunt said. "Did you consume any beverage offered by Fritz?" "Yes. Coffee." My eyes ticked to Fritz's coffee in the kitchen. Fritz's coffee could raise the dead, but it doesn't usually rewrite their memories. "Archie," Wolfe said, "you will speak to Fritz. Discreetly. Then you will go to Mr. Hunt's office and apartment. You will inspect for signs of surveillance or tampering. You will also make inquiries into the Lafferty Foundation, its director, its board, and any recent internal disputes. Use Saul Panzer if needed." "Got it." Wolfe's gaze returned to Hunt. "Until Archie returns, you will remain here. You will not go out. You will not accept telephone calls except those screened by Archie. You will not leave this house without my permission." Hunt started to protest, then met Wolfe's eyes and thought better of it. "Yes, sir," he said. I stood. "I'll get you set up in the south room," I told Hunt. "Fritz will bring lunch, and if you want to whisper to the staircase, save it for later. She doesn't like being disturbed in business hours." He didn't smile, but his shoulders eased about a quarter inch. For a man being told to sit tight in a stranger's house while his memory melted, that was practically a vacation. I escorted Hunt to the front room and parked him with a magazine he didn't intend to read. When I came back, Wolfe was still in the office, staring at the rug as if it owed him something. "Wolfe," I said. "Yes, Archie." "You really didn't see him Sunday?" "No." "You didn't accept any documents?" "No." "Then how the hell did Fritz bring him in?" Wolfe's lips went thin. "That, Archie, is precisely why you are going to the kitchen." He lifted his eyes to mine, and they were not bored. They were offended. When Wolfe is offended on behalf of his house, the world gets narrow for everyone else. I will add, he said softly, that I heard no whisper upon the stairs, but I have remarked these past days a certain alteration, not of objects, of atmosphere. I stared. The brown stone, Wolfe went on, has its own equilibrium. It has been disturbed. You and Fritz have behaved normally. Yet I have sensed a presence that is not yours, not Theodore's, not mine. A residue, like the faint odor of a cigar after it is extinguished. He made a disgusted face. I assumed it was my imagination. I do not do so now. And the title of this little opera is The Whispering Staircase, I said. It will not remain a whisper long, Wolfe replied. Go, Archie. I went, and as I crossed the hall toward the kitchen, I found myself looking at the stairs, the old, solid, polished steps that have carried too many clients, cops, crooks, and cranks past Wolfe's front door. They looked the same as always, which in my experience is exactly when they're most likely to start talking. The kitchen was doing what kitchens ought to do at 11-something, smelling good and pretending nothing human ever happened outside of sauces. Fritz was at the center of it in a white jacket that managed to look like a uniform and a conscience at the same time. He had a knife in his hand and an attitude on his face that said any man interrupting him in this moment had better be dying or paying. I wasn't either, but I had Wolfe behind my eyes, which counts as a medical condition. Fritz, I said. He didn't look up. If you're hungry, Archie, you may be content in exactly 42 minutes. I'll try not to expire before then. I need to ask you about Sunday night. The knife paused. That was all. He kept slicing, but the rhythm changed a hair. Sunday night, he repeated. A man named Caleb Hunt came to the door around 7. You took a note up to Mr. Wolfe. Then you told Hunt that Mr. Wolfe would see him. He says you brought him into the office and gave him coffee. Fritz set the knife down with the dignity you'd use for laying a baby in a crib. Archie, he said calmly, a man did come to the door. He gave me a note. I took it to Mr. Wolfe. Mr. Wolfe read it. He said, "Pooey." I returned the note to the man and told him Mr. Wolfe would not see him. That's it. That is all. I watched him the way a man watches another man holding a loaded memory. You didn't offer coffee? No. You didn't tell him to wait? No. You didn't bring him in? No. What did he look like? A sober man, clean. He held his hat in his hands like a schoolmaster. He spoke politely. He was anxious. Fritz's eyes met mine. It is possible you call him Mr. Hunt. I do not know his name. And you're sure you didn't bring him in after you went upstairs? I'm sure. Wolfe says he didn't see him either, but Hunt is downstairs convinced he did. Fritz frowned slightly, not at me but at the air, as if it carried an imperfection he had to correct. Then Mr. Hunt is mistaken, he said, or was made mistaken. Fritz's frown deepened. He took that personally. The brownstone isn't just Wolfe's sanctuary, it's Fritz's too. He doesn't like the idea of foreign hands anywhere near his pots or his people. I have had no reason to lie to you for 30 years, he said quietly. I know. If I thought otherwise, I'd be having lunch somewhere else. I'm fishing for details, not confessions. He nodded once. Then I will help you. After I returned the note, the man did not leave immediately. He stood on the stoop a moment. I heard him take a breath, like a man struck in the stomach. Then he descended. I closed the door. I heard no further sound. You didn't hear him on the stairs? There are no stairs on the stoop, Archie. There are steps. Front hall stairs, I said. Fritz blinked at me. He did not enter the house. Therefore he did not use the stairs. I let that sit. It was clean. It was also explosive. Okay, I said. One more thing. Did anyone else come to the door Sunday night? Anyone you didn't mention because they weren't clients? Fritz's eyes went thoughtful. He mentally walked the hours like he was checking his pantry. No, he said at last. Theodore did not come. Mr. Kramer did not come. The telephone did not ring. There was no delivery. He hesitated. Around 8:30, I took out the rubbish. A car was parked across the street. It was there a long time. That is not unusual for the neighborhood. But it had no lights. I found it idle. What kind of car? Dark, a sedan. I could not tell the make. Any person inside? I did not see one. That was what Fritz would give me. The truth, plus whatever spice he could add without risking the broth. I thanked him and turned to go. "Archie," he said behind me. I looked back. "Mr. Wolfe is disturbed." "He's insulted," I said, which for him is the same as disturbed, only with better vocabulary. Fritz nodded once more to himself. "Then perhaps you should eat well before you go out. You will need patience." "You're either a cook or a prophet," I said. "Maybe both." When I left the kitchen, Wolfe was in the office, alone, with his head tilted as if he was listening to the walls. "Well?" he asked. "Fritz says Hunt never came inside. He gave you a note. You said phooey. Fritz handed it back and sent him away. No coffee, no office, no stairs." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Therefore, either Fritz lies or Mr. Hunt is deluded. Fritz would sooner poison himself than lie to you about a client, which leaves deluded." "Or deceived," Wolfe corrected. "Delusion is spontaneous. Deception is engineered." "That's your word for it." "It will do." Wolfe drummed thick fingers once on the armrest. "Tell me about the note." "I didn't see it." "You will endeavor to recall Fritz's description of it." "He didn't describe it." Wolfe stared at me for half a second in the way he does when he wants to be unfair and knows he can get away with it. "You will speak to him again, then." "I'll handle it. What's next?" "Next," Wolfe said, "you will go to Mr. Hunt's office and apartment as I instructed, but at once. Also, before leaving, you will examine the stairs." I stared. The stairs? The staircase is now a pivotal object in Mr. Hunt's account. It is the locus of his supposed whisper. It therefore may contain a clue or a mechanism, or it may be purely psychological. We must not assume. I'll poke your sacred staircase for bugs, wires, and poltergeists. Anything else while I'm playing housemaid? Yes. Take a photograph of each step, and the banister, and the upper landing. Use your camera, not memory. When Wolfe says that last part, he's telling you he suspects memory has been messed with. I felt the room get another degree colder. "All right," I said. "But why this case? Foundation accounts, whistleblowers, shadow charities. That's interesting, but you usually need a stronger hook to skip the orchids." Wolfe's chin lifted a millimeter. "The hook is already in our house, Archie." "You mean trespass?" "I mean manipulation. If a man can be made to believe he sat in this chair, then the sanctity of my home has been violated in a way I will not tolerate. Also," he paused, and I knew something else was in there. "Also, the Lafferty Foundation is significant. If its funds are being diverted to political influence research, and if that diversion is concealed with sophistication, then the miscreant is not a petty thief. He is a strategist. And strategists make messes bigger than wallets." "Precisely." I went to the hall, got my camera, and stood at the foot of the stairs for a moment, just looking. I've walked those stairs so many times they feel like part of my own commute between sanity and Wolfe. Nothing about them said trapdoor or hypnosis parlor. They were broad, polished, and as innocent as wood ever gets. I started at the bottom and worked up. I took photos of each step, close on the risers and edges, and another down the banister. I ran my hand along the rail, looking for any fresh scrape, adhesive smear, or unseen bump. Nothing. The only dust lived where dust is allowed to live by old houses and in different physics. At the top landing, I checked the shadowed corner by the plant stand and the coat tree. Same story. No wires, no peepholes, no faint chalk marks. If somebody had perched there to whisper, they'd done it the old-fashioned way, with lungs. Down again. I knocked on the wall paneling halfway up, because you do when your boss is a paranoiac with a brain the size of Manhattan. Solid. I checked behind the umbrella stand. I checked the little table by the newel post. I checked the half-moon of floor beneath the lamp for scuffs. Still nothing. It was when I was crouched by the third step from the bottom, taking a photo and thinking about how I'd explain this to a cop if one wandered in, that I smelled something. Not much. Not enough to call it a smell unless you've been trained by years of Fritz. A faint trace. Oil and metal, clean and chemical, like the inside of a watch shop or a freshly opened toolbox. I leaned in and sniffed the edge of the step. The odor was stronger there. I felt along the underside lip where the step met the riser. My fingers came away with a smear so thin you'd call it imagination if you weren't already in the imagination business. It was slick. I stood, went to the office, and found a small envelope. I went back, used the corner of a clean handkerchief and wiped the area. The handkerchief picked up a faint grey tinge. That was odd. Fritz polishes the stairs each Friday. The polish smells like lemon and old-school virtue, not machine oil. If something was on that step, it hadn't been there long. I pocketed the handkerchief and walked into the office. "Wolfe?" I said. He stopped pretending to read. "Yes?" "There's a faint residue on the third step. Smells like light machine oil. Fresh. I've got it on a handkerchief." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "Bring it." I gave it to him. He didn't sniff it. Wolfe doesn't do crouching or sniffing when he can have facts delivered. He held it close, stared at the smear, then looked at me. "Excellent," he said. "Don't congratulate me yet. I don't know what it means." "That is irrelevant. It means something. And it is physical. That is already useful." He handed it back. "You will take it to Mr. Hunt's office and compare it to any substances you find there. You will also ask him to describe in detail where he stood on the stairs and where he heard the whisper. Not later. Now." I went to the front room, where Hunt was sitting in a chair that had started to lose its charm. When I told him I needed a precise account about the stairs, he looked like a man about to be cross-examined by his own conscience. "I was halfway down," he said. "No, perhaps a little lower. I'd reached the big turn where you can see the door. I heard my name from above, close, not shouted, like someone leaning over the banister. Male or female voice?" He hesitated. "Male, I think. Accent?" "No, just ordinary." "Did you turn around immediately?" "Yes. I looked up. I didn't see anyone. The lights were on, but the landing was shadowed. I called out, 'Yes?' No answer." "You didn't come back up?" "I did. 2 steps. I craned my neck. Still no one." I nodded. "And you're sure you had been inside the house at that moment?" His face tightened. "Yes." "Okay." I didn't press. Not yet. The point wasn't to win an argument. It was to see where his memory bent. I left him with his magazine and a rising sense of being in a maze he hadn't built. Back in the hall, I grabbed my coat. Wolfe was in the office waiting, which would have been unnerving if I hadn't been living with it for years. "I'm going out," I said. "Yes." "Any other instructions besides find the truth and don't let your brain get stolen?" "Do not let your brain get stolen. Also Archie. Call Saul Panzer." I blinked. "Already?" Wolfe's mouth didn't move, but his eyes did. If a strategist has entered my house by proxy, he may have entered yours by proximity. I want eyes on you. Saul will provide them. "Fine," I said. "But if Saul starts critiquing my tie, I'm billing it to the retainer." Wolfe was already reaching for the phone. As I stepped into the cold November air, I felt the brownstone behind me like a big, quiet animal whose fur had just been ruffled the wrong way. And somewhere between my boot and the sidewalk, a thought kept tapping me. If Hunt never came inside Sunday, then that whisper on the stairs was either meant for someone else, or it was meant to be remembered by a man who wasn't there. Both options were ugly. Either somebody had used Wolfe's house as a theater, or somebody had used Hunt's mind as one. I headed for my car, already seeing steps in my sleep. Saul Panzer met me 3 blocks from the brownstone, at the corner where the traffic lights are always red when you're late and always green when you're being followed. He was wearing his usual version of invisibility. Plain topcoat, plain hat, plain face that could pass for a man selling insurance or a man avoiding it. If Saul had ever been born dramatic, he'd have strangled it in the cradle. He slid into the passenger seat without looking at me. "Good morning, Archie," he said. "Morning. Wolfe tell you to babysit me or just to haunt me?" "He said to stay near you." Saul's eyes flicked in the side mirror. "Also that there may be surveillance." "Nothing like a cheerful assignment." I pulled away from the curb. "We're going to Hunt's office first." "Where is it?" "East 47th, in a building that thinks it's a bank." I paused. "Saul, did you ever hear of anybody planting a memory in a man? Not with booze and a friendly smile. Really planting it." Saul took that in. "Not personally, but I've read about drugs, hypnosis, staged environments. The human mind is cooperative if it wants to be." "Yeah. Hunt doesn't look cooperative. He looks like he'd cooperate with a man holding a sledgehammer over his kneecaps. Fear is also cooperative." I wanted to argue with that, but the traffic cut me off and I had to avoid a cab that believed in holy missions. We made it to Hunt's building in 18 minutes, which in Midtown counts as sorcery. The office was on the 9th floor, a suite with glass walls, minimal furniture, and a reception desk that hadn't had a receptionist in it for 10 years. Hunt had apparently built a career on not needing anybody else in the room when he was thinking. The door lock wasn't scratched, and the hallway carpet outside was clean. If someone had visited after hours, they'd left like a ghost, through a door that opened, with shoes that didn't talk. Inside, the air felt used. Not stale, used, like a room that has been occupied by a purpose and then abandoned before it finished. "What am I looking for?" Saul asked softly. "Anything that says someone came in to remind him they could." I moved slowly, not to avoid leaving prints. Saul and I aren't children in spy school, but because I was letting myself notice. He said a framed certificate was turned, a drawer half closed, a pen set on its side. "You believe him?" "I believe he believes it." I went to the desk. It was tidy in a way that doesn't happen by accident. 2 pens in a holder, parallel. A paperweight centered on a blotter. A laptop closed without smudges. There were 2 framed diplomas on the wall behind it, already squared with a level. I checked the nails. No fresh wiggle. I checked the pen holder, dust ring under it. It hadn't moved lately. Either he reset the scene after it happened, I said, or he convinced himself it happened and then went around unconsciously making the room match his conviction. Or the intruder knew he'd check and put things back. Possible. I opened the top right drawer. It slid out cleanly. Inside, there were files in labeled folders, all aligned like a man who trusts paper when people fail. Nothing missing I could know about. No crumbs of torn paper, no disturbed dust. I sniffed the inside of the drawer because Wolfe had put machine oil on my mind. Nothing. Saul was in the short hallway leading to Hunt's little conference room. He was examining the door jamb with a pen light. "No tool marks," he said. "No tape residue. Lock looks original. That fits a key, or a pick used by a pro. Or access through the building." I nodded and crossed to the window. 9th floor looked down on a canyon of taxis and pedestrians. On the opposite sidewalk there was a coffee cart and 3 men in coats pretending to be statues. One of them was too still, which is an occupational hazard if you're standing around all day waiting for someone to leave a building. "See that guy at the cart?" I murmured. Saul didn't turn his head. Yes. Blue scarf, hands in pockets, not buying anything. He's doing a bad job of being casual. He may be doing a good job of being paid. Could be watching us. Could be waiting for Hunt to show. Want to go say hello? Saul's mouth twitched a millimeter. Not yet. Let him think we're blind. Fine, I'll take blind and skeptical. I moved to the file cabinet and opened it. Hunt had a drawer labeled Lafferty Foundation. Inside were his working notes, neat columns, cross-references, key dates. The handwriting was firm and a little tense, like his voice. At the back was a manila envelope with photocopies. Not the core set he said he'd handed Wolfe. This was the backup tier. I flipped through. The photocopies were mostly Foundation ledger pages with certain accounts ringed in red pencil. One was a fund transfer, another was a sub-grant list, another was a vendor invoice with a charity name so generic it might as well have been Good People Doing Nice Things. The Shell Charity. Any names? Saul asked. Plenty. I'm not reading them all right now. I checked the envelope for hairs, extra folds, tape scars. Nothing. He said the dead drop email vanished, that I can't check, but this stuff is still here, which either means the intruder didn't want it, or he was satisfied Hunt had already been warned. Saul leaned over my shoulder. What's that one? He was pointing at a photocopied letterhead, not a ledger. I pulled it free. It was a memo to the Foundation director from a board member about external consulting to support emergent influence models. It was vague, bureaucratic, and sanctimonious, but at the bottom there was a signature. Dr. Cecilia Lafferty. That gave me a small jolt. Lafferty the family, Lafferty the Foundation, Dr. Lafferty the director. If the director herself had signed a memo gesturing toward influence modeling, then maybe the concealment wasn't rogue. Maybe it was policy in the dark. Interesting, I said. I put it back. Okay, let's go to his apartment. Maybe that's where the mess is. We left the suite like two men who weren't sure if the doorman would remember their faces. The guy at the cart was still on the sidewalk when we came out of the building. Saul slowed half a step. I didn't. He followed us with his eyes. He didn't follow with his feet. Maybe a watcher, Saul said when we were in the car. Maybe a bored man with a scarf fetish, but we'll assume watcher. I'll call the building and see who's on the security log for last night. If I get the runaround, we'll widen our romance. Saul gave a small grunt that could mean anything from good idea to, I had a better one, but you're already driving. Hunt's apartment was on West 73rd, in a building with doormen who judge you silently and elevators that complain aloud. We had a key from him. Wolfe doesn't love giving out keys, but he loves losing cases less. Inside, the apartment had the same telltale feel of a man who lives alone and works too much. Clean surfaces, practical furniture, no clutter except books arranged by subject, not color. The briefcase sat on a chair by the entryway. It was closed now. Here, I said, and opened it. The interior was in order, but the leather flap showed a faint crease where it had been folded back recently. That wasn't a crime. It was a habit. But if it had been opened by someone else, they'd been gentle. I checked the desk in his living room. Nothing disturbed. Checked the bedroom dresser. Same. The safe deposit box he mentioned was elsewhere, not in the apartment. What we had to find was the feel of intrusion. Then Saul, who had been circling the living room window, said, "Archie." He held out a corner of the curtain. On the sill, almost invisible unless you knew to look, was a smear of clear putty, the kind used to anchor a small device. I leaned in and sniffed. Nothing, but the putty had a dustless shine compared to the rest of the grit. "Bug mount," Saul said. "Or camera mount," I said. "Pointed where?" Saul angled the curtain. From that window you could see the street and the building entrance. A camera there could watch who came and went. how long they stayed, and whether they carried a briefcase. It didn't need to hear anything. It just needed to count time. I felt my stomach tighten. They were watching him, I said softly. Not breaking into steel, watching to time something, like his trip to the brownstone. Saul nodded. Is there residue like the stair oil? I pulled out my handkerchief with Wolfe's sample and compared the smell. Nothing matched, but this putty said more than the oil did. It said someone had been close, patient, and comfortable setting up shop outside his life. Let's check the hall and street for another mount, I said. We did, and found nothing else. But on the fire escape outside the window there was a fresh scuff on the paint. Narrow, straight, like the edge of a shoe. I stood there looking, and the story started to align in my head, like cards sliding into a hand. Hunt is watched. Hunt comes to the brownstone. He is turned away. Somewhere between front steps and bedtime, someone takes his carbon copies. At home, he finds the briefcase open. He later builds backups. Then he comes back to us believing he was inside, which meant the missing carbon copies were probably lifted before he ever left our doorstep. He thought they were in his briefcase when he got home, because his mind filled in the rest, or because someone made sure he'd feel the briefcase later with the right weight and the wrong contents. Either way, the whisper on the stairs was a sign, not for him at the time, maybe for his future self, a planted line to root a planted memory. Archie, Saul said quietly, still by the window. What? There's someone across the street, in the doorway, watching the building. I looked. Same blue scarf guy from the coffee cart, or his twin. 9 blocks apart. Same posture, same brand of stillness. Okay, I said. He followed us. That makes him more than bored. What do you want to do? I considered. If Wolfe were here, he'd already have framed the man as a pawn, not prey. My job was to confirm pawn status without stepping on the board. We're not grabbing him, I said. We're noting him. We'll leave, circle once, and see if he trails. Then I want his plate and his employer. If he's a pro, he'll drop us. If he's a message, he'll want us to see him being seen. Saul's lips pressed together in approval. We left the apartment, took the elevator down, and walked out to the sidewalk like 2 men who had accomplished nothing interesting. The blue scarf was still there, glancing at his watch in a way that suggested he wanted us to know he'd been waiting. Yeah, I muttered. Message. When we reached the car, I didn't start it right away. I stared into the rear view at the street behind us and thought about machine oil on my staircase, clear putty on Hunt's window, and a man who wanted the staircase to whisper again. Then I started the engine. Call Wolfe, Saul said. In a minute, I said. First, I want to see if our friend likes long drives. I pulled off into traffic, and the blue scarf stepped away from his doorway as if he'd just remembered something urgent on a different continent. He didn't follow on foot. But 2 cars back, when I made the first turn, a dark sedan eased into line without a hurry. I didn't need Saul to say it. We weren't alone in the city, and we weren't alone in the case. I made 3 turns in as many blocks, the casual kind a man makes when he's looking for parking, and the dark sedan made them too. It wasn't tailgating. It wasn't trying to be subtle either. It held the exact comfortable distance that says, we're here. You know we're here. That's the point. Saul glanced back once, then forward. Same car Fritz saw Sunday, he asked. If Fritz could identify a dark sedan at 20 paces, I'd put him on payroll as a spotter. But yeah, likely family. Want me to take the wheel? No, I'm in the mood to drive like a sinner. I turned onto Broadway and let the traffic thicken. Tailors hate thick traffic unless they're pros. This one didn't hesitate. He stayed with us like glue that had read the street map. Pro, Saul said, or a very dedicated amateur with a good teacher. I eased into a lane, let 2 cabs slide between us, and then drifted right, taking the next turn a shade too late for polite society. The sedan didn't jump, it didn't honk, it didn't panic. It made the same late turn as if we'd prearranged it over coffee. "Okay," I said. "We've been introduced." "Plate?" Saul had already scribbled it on a small pad without looking like he was doing anything besides resting his hand. "I'll run it later," I said. "Let's not waste our afternoon giving him a tour of Manhattan. We'll head back to the brownstone, but not directly. If he wants to be seen, we'll let him see us coming home." "You want him to know where we live?" Saul asked. "He already does. They knew Hunt came to Wolfe. They knew enough to put machine oil on our stairs. This isn't about secrecy. It's about control. Wolfe won't like that, but it's where we are." Saul gave me the faintest nod. We did a slow loop through the Park West drives, then down past the circle and into the less theatrical streets. The sedan stuck like a barnacle. Not once did it try to pass or drop. It wanted to be part of the narrative. Fine. I can read a narrative. When I turned onto our block, I didn't pull to the curb right away. I cruised past the brownstone, went another half block, then U-turned and parked in front. The sedan rolled by at walking speed, the driver hidden behind glare. There were 2 men in it, silhouettes. The passenger turned his head toward us, not sharply, but enough. Message received. We got out. Saul did not look at them. I did. The sedan continued on. By the time we were at our steps, it was gone. Inside, the brownstone was doing the other form of pretending nothing happened. Quietness. Fritz would be setting lunch on the dining room sideboard. Theodore would be clattering something upstairs that had no good reason to clatter. And Wolfe would be in the office, waiting for my report the way a spider waits for the fly to announce itself. He was in the office, all right. But instead of sitting behind the desk, he was at the window with his hands behind his back. That meant he'd been standing for more than a minute. Wolfe only stands when he's thinking hard or furious. Sometimes both. He turned as we came in. "Archie," he said. His voice was level. His eyes weren't. "Saul's with me," I said. "You asked. He's staying close." "I see." Wolfe's gaze flicked to Saul, dismissing him in a way that Saul doesn't mind because Saul understands Wolfe is a sovereign state. "Report." I gave him the apartment first. The putty on the sill, the scuffed fire escape paint, the implication of surveillance. Then the office. No sign of forced entry. Nothing obviously disturbed, but the Lafferty memo signed by Dr. Cecilia Lafferty about influence consulting. Then the tail, blue scarf guy in 2 places, and the sedan following us into the neighborhood and past the brownstone. Wolfe listened without interruption. When I finished, he returned to his chair, sat, and exhaled as if he'd been holding air in his chest for the length of my speech. 2 men in the sedan? Silhouettes. 1 driving, 1 watching. I couldn't make a face. Nevertheless, they wished you to know they were there. Yep, it was practically a handshake. Wolfe grimaced. A vulgar one. "So," I asked, "what does it add up to in that head of yours?" "It adds up to a deliberate campaign of pressure and misdirection," Wolfe said. "Mr. Hunt has been watched. His papers were stolen without physical confrontation. His perception of Sunday evening was redirected, whether through drug, suggestion, or constructed narrative. And now you are watched as well to ensure that you comprehend the seriousness of their interest." "That's what I got too," I said. "You have another layer in there." "Always. The phrase about the staircase is a tether. It anchors memory. It is a tool used by one who understands cognition or who has consulted those who do." "You mean the influence modeling stuff?" "Precisely. If the Lafferty funds are underwriting behavioral persuasion research, then the strategists behind this are not merely stealing, they are experimenting. Mr. Hunt may be a subject as much as a threat." Saul spoke for the first time. "You think they tried to implant a false recollection to see if it would take?" Wolfe's eyes moved to him. "Possibly. Or to create deniability. If Mr. Hunt later accuses someone of stealing his evidence after leaving this house, he can be painted as unreliable, even deranged. In either case, they erode his credibility. And mine, if I back him, I said. And mine, if I accept his documents. Wolfe's lips thinned, except that I did not. So their plan contains a miscalculation. Assuming they know you didn't, they will learn it. His glance went toward the door as Fritz arrived with lunch on a tray. Cold roast beef, pickled beets, and a dense brown loaf that could support a bridge. Fritz set it down without any sign he'd noticed the tension in the room, which meant he'd noticed it and chosen to ignore it because the beets were more important. Wolfe ate 2 bites in silence. Then he set down his fork. "Archie," he said, "we require names." I had a feeling. "We will go to the Lafferty Foundation in person." He held up a thick finger to stop the protest I hadn't even fully loaded. "Not I. You will. Request a formal interview with Dr. Cecilia Lafferty as an emissary from me. You will also interview any board member you can access. You will use pretext if necessary." "Easy. I'll tell them I'm selling raffle tickets." "Do not be facetious." Wolfe glared, but it was a working glare. "You will ascertain 1. The identities of those with access to the relevant accounts. 2. The names of any outside research group they have funded. 3. The current tensions within the board, especially between Dr. Lafferty and any dissenting members." "Got it. Anything else?" "Yes. Mr. Hunt's missing carbon copies were taken Sunday evening before he reached home. That means the thief was in physical proximity to him after he left this house. If he did not enter, then the thief may have been on the stoop, on the sidewalk, or in a vehicle." "Like Fritz's dark sedan," I said. "Yes. So we need to know who was parked across the street at 8:30 Sunday." "Exactly. Saul will assist you in tracing that vehicle and any related surveillance," Wolfe said. "You will give him the plate number." I handed Saul the slip. He tucked it away like a coin. Wolfe turned back to me. "We also must stabilize Mr. Hunt. If he is to be useful, he must understand that his memory is not a reliable witness. You will speak to him plainly." "Plainly meaning, don't trust your brain," I said. "Plainly meaning he's being manipulated." Wolfe's voice was quieter now, and that's when it cuts. "I will not have him unravel in my house. If he does, it will be because the adversary intended it." "Okay, I'll talk to him." After lunch, Fritz said mildly from the doorway, as if he were a stage manager reminding the actors of the script, "Mr. Wolfe does not speak of adversaries on an empty stomach." Wolfe shot him a look. Fritz ignored it. Saul pretended not to see either of them. I ate standing, fast enough to keep Fritz from frowning and slow enough to avoid choking. When I finished, I went to the front room. Hunt was still in the chair, but he wasn't reading. He was listening to the house, like a man expecting it to whisper to him again. I sat across from him. "Caleb," I said, "we've checked what you told us. Here's what we know. Fritz didn't bring you in that night. Wolfe didn't see you. You were on the stoop, not inside. Yet your briefcase was opened at home and your papers were gone. Which means someone got them from you before you reached home. And someone wants you to believe you were inside this house. They're messing with your head on purpose." He stared at me. For a second I thought he'd bolt or crack or accuse me of being in on it. Instead, his face sagged in a way that wasn't weakness. It was relief. "So I'm not losing my mind," he said. "You're not losing it. They're trying to borrow it." "Why?" "Because you found something they don't want. Exposed. And because they're smart enough to know destroying evidence is messy, but undermining a witness is clean." He rubbed his forehead. The whisper may have happened, or may be part of the story they planted. We're going to treat it as a signpost either way, but from now on, you don't trust a sensation just because it's yours. You check it. With us. He nodded slowly. "All right. Good. Now tell me about the people at Lafferty. Not the ledger, the people. Who hated who? who was nervous, who talked like they had a stake in it besides virtue? His eyes shifted to the side, thinking. I could see him choosing honesty the way you choose a door when you don't know what's behind it. There are 5 board members who matter, he said at last. Dr. Lafferty, of course. Then Martin Rowe, the treasurer, Elaine Benton, legal counsel, Father Hargreaves, public face, moral spine, and Jonah Skell, young tech donor who thinks in systems. He looked at me. Rowe dislikes Skell. Skell wants modernization. Rowe thinks it's meddling. Benton sides with Rowe. Hargreaves sides with Lafferty mostly. And Lafferty is tired. Brilliant, but tired. She has enemies because she's cautious. I filed the names like Wolfe would, carefully, for later burning. Which one could run a covert influence grant? I asked. Hunt didn't answer right away. When he did, it was soft. Any of them, he said. But only one of them would be able to do it and make others complicit without them realizing. Who? Jonah Skell. He swallowed. He thinks in systems. He talks about behavioral outcomes like he's ordering lunch. And he's the one who pushed for the outside consulting. I nodded. Okay. That's a starting dot, not a conviction. I'm going to Lafferty this afternoon. Saul's chasing your tailors. Wolfe is Wolfe. You stay here, eat, rest. Don't walk near any staircases unless Fritz is in front of you with a rolling pin. A faint smile finally twitched out of him. When I went back to the office, Wolfe was on the phone to Saul already, giving him something dense and directive. He looked up as I entered. We proceed, he said. Yeah, I said. And they're proceeding too. I glanced toward the front window, half expecting to see a blue scarf pasted to the glass like a moth. There wasn't one. That didn't mean the street was empty. It just meant the watchers were good enough to let the house keep its quiet, until they were ready to make it talk. When I got back to the brownstone, the street was behaving itself, which is a lousy sign in our line. There was no dark sedan parked in sight, no blue scarf drifting like a bad omen, no woman in a tan coat auditioning for the role of statue number 4. The house looked as solid and smug as ever, a brick sermon in a neighborhood of noise. Inside it was even quieter. I'm not superstitious, but there are silences that feel like empty beds and silences that feel like loaded guns. This one felt loaded. Wolfe was in his office, of course. If the world ended, he'd still be behind that desk at the gathering, asking the survivors to sit down and stop fidgeting. Saul was there too, perched on the yellow chair by the door like an unobtrusive gargoyle. Wolfe's eyes came up as I entered. You're late. Only by your time. By anybody else's, I'm early enough to be annoying. I tossed my coat on the chair. We've got Helix Meridian tied to the sedan. Saul traced their parking permit. Their tenant directory got scrubbed today. Saul nodded once, verifying. Wolfe leaned back, fingers tented. Good. That provides a direct vector from the Foundation's concealed funds to the surveillance and psychological tampering. Which is nice of them. It saves us the trouble of pretending this is subtle. Do not be misled by convenience, Archie. A strategist permits you to see what he chooses. We must determine why. Why is the easy part. They wanted the extra money and they wanted Hunt discredited if he squealed. Wolfe's mouth twitched. That is part of it. Not all. Helix Meridian also wished to validate a technique. The technique required a controlled, symbolically potent environment. I frowned. You mean the brownstone? Yes. If they can induce a false but coherent memory of meeting me, of being admitted, questioned, and dismissed in my office, then they demonstrate that narrative implantation can be anchored to prestige, fear, and setting. The brownstone served as an archetype in Mr. Hunt's mind, a place where truth is ordained. If he believes he gave me evidence, he will behave accordingly, even if he did not. That's cold, I said. Intellect without ethics is always cold. You're getting philosophical before dinner. Wolfe ignored that. We proceed now to the office gathering. You have already spoken to Dr. Lafferty, Mr. Rowe, and Mr. Skell. You will telephone them and request their presence here at 6. You will also summon Father Hargreaves and Elaine Benton. Tell them that a matter of grave concern to the Foundation and to me requires their attendance. No cops? Not yet. We will invite Inspector Kramer if and when I deem it useful. That's Wolfe, for I want the fun first. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Archie. Right. I'll make the calls. By 5:30, the brownstone was in that state I always notice right before Wolfe springs a trap. Everything normal on the surface, everything humming underneath. Fritz laid out coffee service like we were hosting a poetry salon. Theodore clomped around upstairs, which meant Wolfe had told him to stay out of sight, and Theodore had accepted that as a dare. Hunt was in the south room, pale but steadier, as if he'd finally stopped trying to argue with his own brain and started letting others do it for him. At 10 to 6, the doorbell rang, and then rang again, and then apparently decided to camp out. I let them in one at a time because I enjoy choreography. Dr. Cecilia Lafferty came first, composed and tight. Martin Rowe followed with the cautious dignity of a man entering a courtroom without knowing the charge. Elaine Benton arrived in a tailored coat and a lawyer's expression that was already drafting objections. Father Hargreaves, a lean man with silvered hair and kind eyes made braver by fatigue, came in last, clutching a felt hat like he was entering confession. Jonah Skell arrived exactly at 6, not early, not late, and with a smile that was just a shade too curated for an evening visit to a detective's home. Behind him, a woman I didn't recognize stepped over the threshold as if she belonged. "She's with me," Jonah said before I could open my mouth. "Naomi Vance, Helix Meridian's operations lead. I told her I'd be coming, and she insisted on accompanying me." Wolfe would have called that providential. I call it the fish jumped into the pan. "All right," I said. "Come on in." They filed into Wolfe's office and sat where I directed them. Wolfe was already installed in his chair, hands on the armrests, eyes calm, face like a carved hillside. I took my spot at the side desk with my notebook, just to keep tradition from getting lonely. "Good evening," Wolfe said. "You have been summoned here because a matter involving the Lafferty Foundation has become entangled with an intrusion upon my home. I do not tolerate intrusion. Therefore, you will answer my questions." Nobody spoke. It's amazing how quickly very important people learn to wait when Wolfe is in the room. Wolfe's gaze moved over them slowly. "Mr. Hunt is present in this house. He was engaged to audit the Foundation's accounts. He discovered a concealed flow of funds routed through a shell charity to Helix Meridian. Before he could present his findings, the relevant ledgers were altered, his supporting documents stolen, and his credibility attacked through a crude but ambitious psychological manipulation." Jonah shifted in his chair. Naomi Vance did not. Wolfe continued. "Mr. Hunt was instructed by an anonymous messenger to bring his evidence to me. He did so on Sunday evening. Yet he never entered this house. He was turned away on the stoop. Nevertheless, he later believed he had been admitted, had spoken to me in this office, and had heard his name whispered to him upon the staircase." Father Hargreaves frowned, troubled. Dr. Lafferty's fingers tightened. Rowe's mouth compressed. Benton lifted her chin like she was about to object. Wolfe held up a hand. "You will not interrupt." He turned his eyes to Naomi Vance. "Miss Vance, you are the operations lead for Helix Meridian." "Yes, Mr. Wolfe." "Helix Meridian conducts projects in behavioral persuasion and influence modeling. We conduct advanced program evaluation for non-profits," she replied smoothly. "Modeling public sentiment, identifying barriers to adoption, improving messaging efficacy." "A distinction without moral difference," Wolfe said. "Your firm was engaged for a limited pilot. Yet additional funds reached you via a shell charity." Naomi's expression didn't move. That is not accurate. Indeed, Wolfe's voice stayed mild. Then perhaps you can explain why a sedan registered to your firm's building has been used to surveil Mr. Hunt, to observe my assistant, and to remain in proximity to this brownstone on Sunday evening and today. Naomi's eyes flicked barely toward Jonah. He blinked once, fast. I do not control our contractors' vehicles, she said. You do not? Wolfe looked to Jonah. Mr. Skell, did you control it? Jonah smiled, but now it was the smile of a man who can't find the right room. This is getting theatrical, Mr. Wolfe. I came because Dr. Lafferty asked. If you have evidence of misuse, show it, otherwise we're wasting time. You are wasting mine, Wolfe said pleasantly. But that can be rectified. He picked up a folder from his desk, the one I hadn't seen him open. I knew better than to ask when he got it. With Wolfe, the answer is always, before you were clever enough to demand it. This is a copy of the Foundation's finance export from 3 weeks ago, Wolfe said, and this is the export from Monday morning. The concealed account exists in the former, and not the latter. The corrections were backdated by 90 minutes. They were executed by an administrative credential belonging to the Foundation's CFO. Elaine Benton inhaled sharply. The CFO would never? Perhaps not, Wolfe said, yet the credential was used, in the CFO's absence, from a remote session authenticated through a third-party evaluation portal, Helix Meridian's portal. Silence snapped tight. Naomi Vance's jaw set just slightly. Jonah's eyes sharpened in a way that told me his head was already building a counter-argument. Wolfe went on. The shell charity through which the additional funds flowed is called Civic Futures Outreach. It has no staff, no offices, and a fiscal sponsor whose executive director is related by marriage to one Dr. Lyle Corman of Helix Meridian. Dr. Lafferty stiffened. Corman never disclosed that. No, Wolfe said. He would not, because this was not a benign overrun. It was a covert expansion. The extra funds supported a project titled in Helix documentation as Staircase. Father Hargreaves blinked. Staircase? Wolfe nodded. A term of art for narrative anchoring in a high-prestige environment. An experiment designed to test the implantation of a false episodic memory that would influence future behavior. Jonah opened his mouth. Naomi did too. Wolfe cut them off with a raised finger. I will explain, Wolfe said. Helix Meridian wished to demonstrate to a potential political client that they could induce a reliable, behavior-shaping memory in a resistant subject without direct coercion. Mr. Hunt was selected because he was anxious, ethically motivated, and already under informational stress. He was surveilled to map his routines. His carbon copies were taken Sunday evening to establish a loss he could later rationalize. A phrase, the staircase will whisper again, was introduced as an anchor. Then, through a combination of staged cues and suggestion delivered via a contractor on the sidewalk, he was induced to reconstruct a memory of meeting me. The brownstone was used as the prestige anchor, even though he never entered it. Naomi's face chilled. Jonah's mouth was tight now. Dr. Lafferty stared as if someone had taken a scalpel to her institution. This is fantasy, Jonah said. You're describing Hollywood hypnosis. No, Wolfe said, still calm. I am describing applied cognitive engineering. Your firm calls it influence modeling. I call it trespass. Naomi Vance leaned forward, voice controlled. Even if such a project existed, Mr. Wolfe, you're imputing motives without proof. We have no political clients. Not yet, Wolfe replied. That was the purpose of the experiment, to secure them. He turned to Father Hargreaves. You, Father, were the anonymous whistleblower. Father Hargreaves flinched. How could you? Your ethics made you uneasy about Helix Meridian. You suspected mission drift. You provided Mr. Hunt a trail, but you did not anticipate that Helix would respond by manipulating him. When you learned of the sabotage, you sent him to me as the only man you believed could resist it." Dr. Lafferty looked at him, shocked and pained. "Father." Father Hargreaves bowed his head. "I'm sorry, Cecilia. I feared you would be persuaded by Jonah's brilliance and Martin's caution. I wanted a clean investigation." Wolfe nodded once, satisfied. Then his eyes settled on Jonah. "Mr. Skell, you did not initiate the shell channel. Helix Meridian did, through Dr. Corman, but you became complicit when you discovered the extra flow and chose to protect it, because you believed it served the good." Jonah straightened. "Complicit? I didn't know about any shell charity until Hunt came sniffing. Naomi told me Helix had added a small supplemental analytics package at no cost to us. She said they had found a philanthropic sponsor who wanted to support our health messaging work." Naomi's eyes flicked to him with something like warning. Wolfe raised his brows. "And you believed her?" "Why wouldn't I?" Jonah snapped. "We're trying to save lives. If they wanted to donate extra modeling resources for vaccination outreach, I welcomed it." "Then your pride has made you a useful pawn," Wolfe said gently. "Because when you welcomed it, you also gave them access to your systems, your CFO's credentials, and your institutional legitimacy. They used you and your foundation as a laboratory." Jonah's face went white, then red. He looked at Naomi as if seeing her for the first time and not liking the picture. Naomi stood. She didn't bluster. She didn't plead. She simply moved the way a professional moves when the room has turned. "This is a grotesque misinterpretation," she said. "Helix Meridian will not be slandered in a private parlor by a man famous for orchids." Wolfe's eyes hardened. "Sit down." She did not. I heard another sound then, a footstep in the hall outside the office. Heavy, familiar. Inspector Kramer walked in without being announced and without caring if anyone liked it. Behind him were two detectives who were smaller, younger, and trying not to look impressed by the furniture. "Evening, Wolfe," Kramer said. "Archie called and said you were about to make my night interesting." Wolfe didn't smile. "Inspector, you are timely." Naomi froze. Jonah swallowed. Benton whispered something that sounded like, "We should confer with counsel, which is lawyer for I'd like to be someplace else." Kramer eyed the room. "Okay. Who's the villain and where's the body?" "No body," I said. "Just a laboratory that walked into a non-profit." Wolfe gestured toward Naomi. "This woman's employer has diverted funds, committed unlawful access to financial systems, and orchestrated surveillance and psychological tampering. Dr. Corman can confirm the shell arrangements. Ms. Vance can confirm the project title and methods. The Foundation is a victim of their strategy. Mr. Skell is an accessory by negligence. Father Hargreaves is the whistleblower. Mr. Rowe and Ms. Benton are innocent of the covert diversion but negligent in oversight." Kramer stared at Wolfe the way he does when Wolfe gives him a whole fish already filleted. "You got evidence?" Wolfe slid the folder across. "Copies of the exports, the Shell charity linkages, and a statement signed by Mr. Hunt attesting to the theft and manipulation. Also, Archie will provide his notes on the surveillance." Kramer flipped the pages once, then nodded to his detectives. "Ms. Vance, you're coming with us, and I'll be wanting to talk to Dr. Corman tonight." Naomi's chin lifted. "On what charge?" Kramer smiled without warmth. "We'll find a few. You can argue about them in a nicer building than this one." They took her. She didn't struggle. She didn't need to. Her fight had always been verbal and systemic. But as she reached the doorway, she turned once more to Jonah. "You wanted outcomes," she said softly. "This is what outcomes cost." Then she was gone. Jonah sat like a man who has just watched his religion get dragged out in cuffs. Dr. Lafferty's face was a mixture of hurt and steel. Rowe looked relieved and sick at once. Father Hargreaves clasped his hat tighter, as if forgiving himself, would wait. Kramer cleared his throat. Wolfe, I'll need your statements, and I'll be wanting that auditor down at the precinct. Mr. Hunt will cooperate, Wolfe said. With counsel. Kramer grunted. Figures. Archie, walk me out. I did. In the hall, Kramer leaned close. You really buy that memory implant business? I buy that Helix tried it, I said. Whether Hunt swallowed it because of trickery or stress doesn't matter to the law. They stole, hacked, and stalked. The rest is flavoring for the jury. Kramer nodded. You keep your house locked tonight. Wolfe's already doing that, plus whatever menacing Latin he knows. When I returned, the office had thinned to the people Wolfe allowed to stay: Dr. Lafferty, Jonah, Father Hargreaves, Rowe, Benton, Hunt, and me. Wolfe looked at them the way a surgeon looks after removing a tumor, relieved but unsentimental. Dr. Lafferty spoke first, voice low. Jonah, did you truly not know? Jonah's face twisted. I didn't know about any shell. I didn't know they were running an experiment. I thought they were helping. I thought, if we could model belief better, we could save more people. And to save people, you were willing to manipulate them, Father Hargreaves said sadly. Jonah flinched. You manipulate people every Sunday when you preach. Father Hargreaves didn't rise to it. Preaching invites choice. Engineering removes it. Wolfe raised a hand. Enough. Mr. Skell, you are not beyond redemption, but you are beyond naivete. You will learn that good intentions are a poor substitute for restraint. Jonah looked at him, angry and ashamed in equal measure. And what now? Now you will assist Dr. Lafferty in repairing your foundation's safeguards. Wolfe's voice sharpened. You will do so publicly. You will admit an error in judgment. If you refuse, your donors will read about your capitulation to Helix Meridian in a courtroom transcript. Jonah swallowed. Then he nodded once, stiffly. All right. Wolfe turned to Dr. Lafferty. You will sever all ties to Helix Meridian and audit all disbursements for the last 12 months. Mr. Rowe will supervise. Ms. Benton will ensure legal transparency. Father Hargreaves, you may retain your conscience without duplicity by placing it where it belongs, in open debate. Dr. Lafferty's eyes glistened, but she didn't let a tear land. Thank you, Mr. Wolfe. He gave her a short nod. Not kind, not unkind. You are welcome. I regret only that you were made a stage for another's vanity. They left in a subdued procession, like people who had come to be interrogated and departed to rebuild a world. Hunt lingered last. I'm sorry, he said to Wolfe, voice thick. About your house. About being used. Wolfe looked at him. You are not to blame for another man's strategy. You are to blame only if you permit it to destroy your judgment. You have not. Hunt breathed out like he'd been holding it since Sunday. Thank you. He went upstairs to wait for Saul to drive him to Kramer with counsel attached. When the door closed and the house began to return to itself, Wolfe shifted in his chair and regarded me. Well, Archie? Case closed, I said. Brownstone unhaunted. Staircase back to minding its manners. Not entirely, Wolfe said. I raised an eyebrow. He gestured faintly toward the hall. They used my home as an instrument. They believed intellect ennobled their trespass. That is a common modern delusion. And your cure? Exposure. Wolfe's voice was soft now, almost tired. Not because exposure is dramatic, but because it is disinfectant. Cleverness must answer to ethics, or it becomes predation. Put that on a plaque, I said. Foundation would buy it. Wolfe snorted. Pfui. Fritz appeared in the doorway like the voice of civilization. Dinner is served. Wolfe rose with the dignity of a bishop ending mass. As we went to the dining room, he added, almost as an afterthought, It is fortunate, Archie, that stairs do not whisper. People do, and too often what they whisper is that their appetites excuse their sins. I pulled out his chair. You're saying Helix got hungry? I'm saying, Wolfe replied, settling in, that hunger is natural. The sin is in pretending it is virtue. I sat, reached for the bread, and decided that if anyone was going to whisper in this house tonight, it would be Fritz's roast duck telling us to shut up and eat.